Shalom Aleichem for Yud Gimel Shvat. The Mishnah Yomi is holding in chapter 6 of Ketubot, Mishnah Hey, the fifth Mishnah. Hamasi et bito stam. A father is marrying off his daughter. Stam sometimes stands for Sefer Torah Tefillin Mezuzot, but here it just means the simple word, which is without specifying. Stam, he didn't specify an amount he wanted to contribute for dowry. So what's the minimum acceptable dowry for even the poorest girl getting married among the Jewish people? Lo yivchot lo, he can give her no less mechamishim zuz, than 50 zuz. So whether that's cash or property or furniture or a BMW, it can't be less than 50 zuz, which it's not a ton of money because we know from the Pesach Haggadah that you could buy a little goat for 2 zuz. So this is like 25 goats worth of dowry. If anyone's ever been to a Jewish wedding where they gave goats as dowry, please let me know. I'd be very interested. Anyway, the Mishnah goes on, Pasuk lehachnisa aruma. What if the father said, I am bringing her to the chuppah aruma? Now, aruma literally means naked, but what the father means is I'm not going to be buying her clothing from now on. I'm not buying the wedding dress. I'm not buying the sheitel. So if this is the case where the father doesn't want to keep, buying expensive wedding clothing and the like for his daughter to wear, Lo yomar abal, the husband cannot respond, kashe achnisa levaiti, when I bring her to my house, meaning after chuppah, achaseina bichsuti, I will clothe her from my own assets. Ella, rather, what does the husband have to do? Mechosa, he has to provide her clothing. Va'oda b'veit aviha, even though she's still living at the father's house, he has to start giving her the clothing. After all, this is the clothing she's going to wear at the wedding and once she's living in his home. So the poskim here, the legal authorities explain that, for instance, if the kala, the girl, is from a very poor family and her clothing is not high quality, not very ornate, not very, befitting of a high status individual, and the husband is from a more wealthy family, then the husband, it's his responsibility to send her before the chuppah, before the actual marriage ceremony, clothing that befits his status, so she can go to the wedding and move in with him in a dignified appearance. As we've learned previously in Ketubot, that a wife from a lower social or financial status goes up with the husband. It doesn't go down. Even if he's a lower financial rung, she still needs to be honored appropriately. The Mishnah continues, V'chen, and also hamosiat yatoma. When the community is marrying off an orphan, a girl without parents, lo yivchot lo mechamishim zuz, they can give her no less than 50 zuz. And the Tosfot Yantav points out this is even if the managers of the community tzedakah fund have to borrow the money, then they need to give her no less than the standard minimum dowry of 50 zuz. Im yesh bekis, and if they have it in the pocket, kis here meaning the fund, the tzedakah fund for the community, mefarnisinota lefi kvoda, then you have to give her a dowry fitting her honor, like the social situation of her family, what would be an appropriate dowry to give if her parents were alive and able to give. Now in Mishnah Vav, a yatoma, now here it's a different yatoma, her father's passed away, shehisiota ima o achecha midaita, and her mother or her older brothers are bringing her to the chuppah, and she's in full agreement of the wedding. We've mentioned this in Masechet Yevamot, that if the father passed away, the father has a biblical power to marry off his daughter until the age of Narut, until about 12 and a half. But if he's passed away, he's out of the picture, and there's a situation in which it's beneficial for the little girl. For instance, there's crusades around, there are local pagans or, non-Jewish people who tend to abduct, God forbid, young Jewish girls. This happened throughout Jewish history, particularly in the Middle East. Then it would be wise to get her married off. So then the mother or the brothers had the power to marry her off rabbinically. Now recall in Yevamot, we said about there was a concept of miyun, that if she was married off at a young age, she did have a right of refusal as well. So here she's agreeing to this rabbinical marriage that her mother or her brothers have set her up with for her own protection or her own parnasa. And the mother or the brothers, they write her a dowry. They say, we're going to give you 100 or we're going to give you 50. Yecholahi misha tagdil. So once she gets older, the bride can go and collect this money from the estate. Lahotzi miyadan. She can collect it from them. Mosher uilinatan law. What she's actually fit to get. Now the Gemara explains that if her deceased father's estate was a larger estate, she might be, it might have been appropriate to give her much more than 100 or much more than 50 zuz. And the Gemara explains the standard calculation was when the father had passed away and leaving daughters who were not married, that each daughter was actually entitled to 10% of the estate assets as her dowry. And it's interesting, the Gemara points out, well, what if there's 10 daughters? Then there's no estate left. So they point out, well, really, it's 10%, then 9%, then 8%, then 7%. And then once they've married off all 10 daughters, they get back together, and it ends up that everyone gets 5.5% because they've taken 55% of the estate in total amongst the 10 daughters. But anyway, the Mishnah's point here is if the mother or brothers of the Kala have, written a specific amount, then if she really is worthy to get a larger amount from the estate, she can actually go and get it. Rabbi Yehuda says a different calculation, im hisi et habot rishona. If the father, before he passed away, he married his oldest daughter off, or any daughter off, yinotin l'shniya, so then when the second daughter gets married after the father has passed away, we give her kederech shnaton rishona, the same kind of dowry he gave for the honor of the first marriage. The other sages disagree. They say, sometimes a man is poor and gets rich, or he's rich and then gets poor. And the Farshim point out, it might not be literal. It might be that he's feeling more generous at some times than others, and sometimes a little more stingy. So it's not really, he's not trying to show favorites, but sometimes his attitude is just more generous in terms of dowry. So rather what do we do? We appraise the assets of the estate, and we give her what is fitting, which we said is 10% of the entire estate assets. Yashar Koach, and you should all be zoche to a wonderful dowry of Torah and mitzvot.